Okay? The passive voice now is this. John, and I'm going to take this, is being what? Hit. Okay? We'll go by Paul. Now, which way do the arrows go?
Yeah, right.
It's going from this way to John. Now, John is the subject of the sentence, but he's being acted on by what?
Paul.
The accusative, the direct object. Okay? So John is being hit by Paul. Up here, John is hitting Paul. Okay? Now, so if we think of the active voice, if I'm the subject, active is I'm doing something, right? Passive voice, something is what? Being done to myself. The New Testament employs what is called the active and passive voice. When the subject of a sentence does the action of the verb, then it is in the active voice. If the subject receives the action of the verb is in the passive voice. The direct object acts upon the subject. In our modern-day Western civilization, the passive voice sounds foreign to our ears. We are a culture that what? Does things. We are neither comfortable nor familiar with being acted upon. Even computer word processing programs such as Microsoft Word flag the passive voice as what? Improper English. Okay? Unfortunately, our inclination to the active voice does impact our reading of the New Testament. The result is that we will often interpret New Testament passives as things that we do. Okay? Verbs that we need to act upon, rather than what God is doing to and for us. Verbs that God is doing to us. The difference is huge because it changes the whole meaning of a passage. Take a moment and refer to the handout titled Understanding the Passive Voice of the New Testament. Okay? This sheet has a list of a lot of passives. And what was really interesting for me, I don't know what kind of translations you guys have, but I have this is my Greek one, but I use the English Standard Version. And a while back, I was just curious, and I went to the word sanctified, okay, in the concordance. Now, I'm sure sanctified is used much more than what it is in the concordance of the ESV Bible. But I took every word on the word sanctified, and I went through every word on sanctified, and every single one was what? In the passive. Kind of blew my mind away. Okay? And so we look at this here, the passive voice, and for their sake I consecrate myself, that they also may be sanctified in truth. Now, here's a little trick, you guys. The English translations, they try to pick up the passive by using what? Be. Okay? So typically when the English translation, they do their best in the English translations when they use the word like be sanctified. Okay? Or being led. Okay? That word be really brings out and fleshes out the passive voice. Okay? And so you have some others there, the passive voice with the word justification, the passive voice with the word sanctification. There's also some other notables there. The word in Matthew 18:3, which is really interesting, is where Jesus says, I say to you, unless you turn and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. That word you turn is, guess what? Is in the passive. So we could actually really try to flesh out the passive unless you are changed. Unless you're being changed. Unless someone is changing you into children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. So passive voice, it's something that's happening to us. The word in John 3:3, Jesus answered him, truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is what? Born again. Okay, there again, it's a passive. It's something that happens to us, that we're to be born again. Okay? This is interesting too. In Ephesians 6:10, finally what? Be strong. That word be strong, you guys, here's what's interesting. I believe, yeah, and this is what's interesting. And I'm still working on this, so you guys can come along the journey. Here's what's interesting. It's an imperative and also a passive. So Paul is commanding the church of Ephesus. He's saying two things. I'll say in the imperative, get strong. But then he adds the passive. Okay? So he does a command for you to be acted upon. Hey, Ephesus, be strengthened. So he's telling them to let somebody strengthen them. Isn't that cool? So he's saying to the church in imperative, this is something you need to do, but by the way, you're not doing the action is happening to you. See where that makes sense, guys? You look at this one, Colossians 2:6. This is really cool. This is fun to preach, you guys, and teach. They received Christ Jesus as Lord. So it says, so walk in him, rooted and built up and established in the faith. All three of those are what? In the passive. Okay? So they received your Christ Jesus, so walk in him, being rooted, being built up in Jesus, and established passively in the faith. So if we're to preach that and teach that and read in our devotions, it's something where we're being rooted, we're being built up, and we're being established. Okay? You guys got this? I just love this. It's just it messed a lot of things up for me as I started exploring this. I'm like, oh man.
I say we miss so much then in the English translation. I mean, a lot.
You know, and like I said, they do the best they can, and I think phenomenal job, better than I could ever do. But they use the word be. But that's where you guys are sharpening your swords by using this e-sword. So like when we look at this Colossians passage, right there, I'm like, as a pastor, I'm like, three points. Today you're being rooted, today you're being built up, and today you're being established by Jesus Christ, my church. My fellow brothers and sisters. Christ, who began a good work in you, is taking that to completion. Oh, this one. We gotta do this one. 2 Corinthians 5:20, okay? I'm sorry. This is great.
You gotta do them all.
It's gotta be quick if you're gonna be using the phrases.
All right, this is really cool. 2 Corinthians 5:22, or 5:20. Sorry, says. Let's see, 5. Okay, so we are ambassadors for Christ, since God is making His appeal through us. We entreat you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. So he's entreating. He's saying as an ambassador of Christ, I'm entreating you to what? Be reconciled. He's not saying that in the active voice. So if I were to say, all right, Carl, I implore you, reconcile yourself to God. Active voice. Carl, I implore you, let God reconcile you. Let the gospel reconcile you to the Father. Hear that? The difference? Cool stuff. Okay?